Hey everybody, this is Scott Arnell, and welcome to this episode of the SRI 360 podcast, where in every episode I interview world-class, sustainable, and responsible investors, executives, or entrepreneurs who are driving positive change in the world while achieving market returns. And I do this in order to bring you the lessons that they've learned along the way from their investment activities and their experiences, and to find out what they are actually doing and how they are doing it so that you can have better insights into the different SRI investing strategies that are actually being done today and what they're actually doing right now, and doing it across many different asset classes. And hopefully this will help you invest in a more purposeful way and to invest for positive impact for a better world through your investment activities. On this podcast, I have primarily interviewed investors from well-known investment firms, many that are household names, who are managing hundreds of millions of dollars or euros in sustainable and responsible investments. This episode is going to be a bit different, and I'm going to shift gears a little bit by speaking with someone who, unless you have been deeply immersed in sustainable agricultural food chains, you may not have heard of before. So today, I will be speaking with Peter Arensman, and that's spelled Arensman. And Peter is an experienced entrepreneur and investor and strong business development professional with over 30 years experience. Now, the reason I wanted to speak with Peter is because early on, after he founded the financial professional subcontracting firm BAS Consultancy, he felt he wanted more than financial success, and he decided to invest a substantial amount of his earnings in world-improving companies. Since then, he's been on an odyssey that led him to found the investment company People, Planet, Profit BV, which is a social enterprise in the Netherlands with the goal to make global food chains as sustainable as possible. Later on, he founded the venture capital fund Future Food Fund, which is investing in early-stage, innovative, fast-growing companies in the food tech and AgTech sectors with the aim to make the food system more sustainable. Peter sits on the boards of several companies. He is a guest lecturer at Wageningen University and holds master's degrees in business economics, financial law, and agricultural engineering. Peter is Dutch and is based in The Hague in the Netherlands, and he has had a very interesting journey learning to invest in a way that makes impact. I think what is particularly interesting is that Peter did not have a background in investing or in sustainability or in anything to do with responsible investment, but he wanted to make a difference, and so he just decided to do it from where he is at. And he did it, and he is doing it now. His funds are definitely investing on a smaller scale than a lot of the people that have appeared on the podcast, but that's the point. Anybody can be an impact investor, and you don't have to be a fund manager at a big firm. I think Peter is a shining example of just that. We'll be having a far-reaching conversation where we will discuss Peter's early career and how he first founded an IT company and then later a financial professional outsourcing company, how he experienced a lack of satisfaction after a certain amount of financial success, and he realized that helping fellow citizens and thinking about the future of the world gave him a lot more satisfaction, how he decided to found People, Planet, Profit BV, which is where he cut his teeth on responsible investment, then how his experiences there led him to go back to his boyhood agricultural roots and found Future Food Fund, and how he came up with the fund structure. We go in some detail about his portfolio approach, how he deploys capital, how they select investments, including some concrete examples, and a whole lot more. You can find Peter on LinkedIn and on the internet at peopleplanetprofit.com or at futurefoodfund.nl. I really look forward to having this conversation with Peter, and I think you will find it quite different and very enjoyable. And now, please meet Peter Arensman. Are you in The Hague right now?
Yes, I'm in The Hague, yes. I just
Yeah.
on my 4-month sabbatical.
4-month sabbatical.
Yeah.
Well, I got to hear about that.
I have been on a rowing trip across the Mediterranean Sea with a team of 4.
And where did you start?
We started in Gibraltar, and the plan was to end in Athens, but due to the wind, we had to change our course. So we, instead of going from Spain to Italy, we had to go all the way up north along the French coast, and then so in the end we finished somewhere in the most southern part of Italy. We rode 3,000 kilometers. That was the goal. So we made that in 10 weeks. So that was nice.
Wow. Are you like a religious rower and you do this all the time?
No, I like rowing, but I'm not a lot of things very religious. I'm just.
That's quite a sportive thing to do, though. Well, listen, thanks very much for agreeing to get together. And I'd like to, before we dive into it, chat briefly about your background. And from the research I did on you, it looks like you're pretty much tried and true Dutchman living in the Netherlands, I think, for most of your life. Is that pretty much true?
Yeah, unfortunately, that's true. Once you start your own company in certain countries, it's not that easy to relocate. So I visited a lot of my friends from university who were working for large corporates and were sent all over the world. So I lived for a little over 3 months in East Lansing.
In the United States?
Yeah, because
Yeah.
I've been doing a summer course in Michigan State.
Ah, okay, okay.
Well,
It depends what time of the year you did that studies and whether that was a nice experience or not.
it was great. It was in the summer, so there was
All
nobody
right.
except for the students who flunked and had to stay there all summer. So that was all the party students.
Hey, and if my research is right, I guess your story starts somewhere on a farm in Hure Overflakke.
Yeah, very well.
Tell me about that. Your father was a farmer, maybe?
Yeah, he was a farmer. He was having at that time a medium-sized farm. No animals, just crops. So
What crops was he growing?
typical staple crops: wheat, potatoes, onions, sugar beets. And that's not completely true. That was about half of the farm. The other half were tulip bulbs and tulips and gladiols.
Okay. All right. And did you work on the farm or were you part of it?
I started when I was 4 years old. I was always working at the farm.
Okay.
Loved
Okay.
it.
I actually grew up south of Chicago. There's a community of Dutch immigrants, and actually, I'm part of my mother's family immigrated around the 1860s. And they were farmers and they did mostly onion sets. They had often big families. And when they were celebrating a new baby in the family, usually the patriarch was sitting there and saying, "Yeah, we have another weeder in the family."
That's. I've been doing a lot of weeding. I loved it because you see the result of your work immediately. So when you look back, a clean field. When you look ahead, you see this dirty field. And funny enough, today we visited a startup who is producing a weeding robot, and tomorrow we visit another startup
Yeah.
producing a weeding robot. So I love those two startups because it really reminds me of my youth where I was weeding for weeks at a row. Always with the short. I always was weeding with the short. How do you call it? The short. How do you call it? I always use the
Uh,
one with the very short stick. So I was always on my knees in the field or bending forward because you were
yeah,
very.
and always in nice weather there. So did you live all your life there until you went
No,
to a
we
university?
moved after 12 years to another island, also in South Holland, called Voorne Putten. It's the island next door. And my father stopped farming, unfortunately, because my
Oh.
big dream was to take over the farm, but he stopped and sold the farm. When I finished high school, I had no clear ambition, so I decided to go to university since I happened to be above average in school. So I did my master's in Rotterdam in business economics.
You have quite an extensive education. It seems like so you're an Erasmus and Masters in Business Economics. That's a good period of time from 1981 to 1988, something like that. But I guess you did your first degree and then your master's after that.
Yeah, in those days it was still nominal. It was 5.5 years that study, and I took 7 years studying in the Netherlands. Those times was one big party because you were getting a lot of money from the government, and there was no pressure. You could study for 10 years and get a scholarship for 10 years. It was fantastic.
And then you, later on, got a master's in financial law at the same
Yeah.
place, huh? Yeah. What was your idea to get that?
During my business economics education, I already did some law topics, and I thought it was very interesting. And then at that time, the financial law master didn't exist yet. And then 15 years later, I heard from somebody that if you had your master's in business economics, you could go straight towards the master in financial law. So you didn't have to do a separate bachelor for your law degree. As an entrepreneur, law is always more or less the most relevant area for study area.
And that was a couple of years. And then they say, I guess, three is a charm. And eventually, after another break, you went on to get a third graduate degree.
Yes. So what happened is I've been making good money in the last 20 years, and I'm not extremely rich, but I make enough money to live comfortably, to fly business class if I want to, best hotels, best restaurants, and house, etc. So all money more than that, I found out, doesn't give you any satisfaction. And I'm amongst many successful entrepreneurs. I know, say, half of the Forbes 500 entrepreneurs in the Netherlands. I know them, all very rich, and they all, a lot of them seem to get. They come into in some one day. They all are racing against each other. Who is the richest? So it's they're not making money anymore to live with the money, to have fun with the money. No, they're making money to make money. So it's very addictive for some people. They have a lot of money, and they want more money. They can never ever spend it anymore, but they're trapped in like kind of a making more. And I have many friends doing that. And I also saw that these people, they were collecting all kinds of material stuff. At first, of course, you get yourself a huge house, and then you get your second house in Geneva or in Montana, your third house, Ibiza, etc. And then when you have all the houses, you buy, of course, your own boat, and then you get a small boat, then you get a big yacht, and then you buy your own plane. And many friends of mine did that. They have all this stuff, and they're still not very happy, because every time when they buy a new toy, the satisfaction period is shorter. A friend of mine, he has 5 Bugattis, 5 of the new Bugattis. And every time, of course, it's less fun for him. The first one was a lot of fun, and then number 5, which was of course the most expensive one, gives him the least fun. So I saw that, and I thought, what gives me satisfaction? And apart from acting in a sustainable way, helping your fellow citizens or thinking about the future of the world, that gives me a lot of satisfaction, but also collecting knowledge. I think studying and gathering knowledge gives me a lot of satisfaction. So that's why I decided to do a third study, and maybe one day
that was in management, economics, and consumer studies, huh?
Yeah, which is a name, of course, which says nothing, but it's the new name. It used to be called agriculture engineering.
Oh, really?
At the Agricultural University of Wageningen. I became an agriculture economist, more or less.
I have to say that's a very Dutch thing to say. Yeah, I'm not very rich. That's a very Dutch thing to say. I guess your first studies you got done around 1988, and then you started working somewhere around 1989. But most people, when they get out of school, they go look for a job. But it seems to me that you founded a company, but not actually one, but maybe 2 companies in relatively short succession, I think, if my research is right. Tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe you could just take me through your personal journey, because it seems like you started out like in consultancy.
Yeah, I will summarize that. Let's say first, there's one thing not on my resume, and that is I worked for 4 months for the beautiful American firm Cargill. Because when I did my first master's at the Erasmus University, becoming an entrepreneur was something which was experienced in the Netherlands as something negative. So when you had your university degree, you applied for a job at Procter & Gamble or Unilever or a big bank or Shell or Cargill, and only the people who didn't get a job, they started their own firm. And also my study at that time, there was nothing had to do with entrepreneurship. So all our study books, also if you look at the, for example, marketing book we were using was from Philip Kotler from Chicago. All the examples in the book were large corporate examples. But I felt myself an entrepreneurial type. And my first thesis I did for my first study was also called Differences Between an Entrepreneur, an Intrapreneur, and a Manager. I knew exactly that from a psychological point of view, I was an entrepreneur, but I still went for a job with Cargill because all my friends did that. And of course, being a farmer's son, I was very sympathetic towards Cargill, a big trading company. But within 4 months, I realized I was not the type to be part of a big company and doing things which I didn't understand why I was doing them. So I quit, and then I founded first an IT company called Attecc BV. He also wrote down a small dealer company at just the corner shop for your PC and for your maintenance and etc. etc. Later on, I acquired a small company called Signal, which was founded by an American guy in Amsterdam, and I ran these 2 companies for 8 years, and it never became very successful.
What was Signal's business?
They were importing all kinds of stuff from the United States, all network peripherals for the Apple. That was the time that Apple almost went bankrupt and was beat by Microsoft for 110 million. They still have these shares. I think they got, I think something like 28% shares of Apple for 110 million. Around this was around 1995.
And then what happened? Because you finished with Attecc in 1995 and then Signal in 1997.
Yeah, I sold both companies because I wasn't able to make it a big success. So I was struggling for. I had a lot of fun, but I wasn't making any money. Although I'm not too interested in money, it's nice when you don't have to deal with cash flow issues the whole time.
Yeah.
So, I decided to sell the companies and start all over again. So when I was 35, I was back at square one. I had no possessions. I sold my company, which included my car and my telephone. And I also broke up with my girlfriend, which meant I had to leave her house. So I was on the street with an Albert Heijn bag full of my stuff, and that was it.
Albert Heijn, that's the good old big supermarket. So then, so you had a clean slate. Then, is that when you founded BAS, or?
Yes, I worked for a short time in an art trading company in a gallery. So I was totally not raised with art because my father, as a reformed farmer, we did nothing else than work and eat a sandwich with bread, and that was it. For the rest, we didn't have any. Everything beyond that was a useless luxury. No music, no art, no alcohol, because it was all useless. So for me, it was a whole new world where I accidentally rolled into. So now I'm a big art lover. Yeah. But I did that for 8 months to help out a friend, and then in those 8 months, I founded BAS, and that I still have this company. It's now the 24th year I'm running it, and it's mediocre successful, but I can live very comfortably off it. So it's my bread and butter.
This was a consulting company, rent a CFO type of thing, or what is it?
Yeah. And then a little lower level, so we don't rent out the CFO, but we rent the financial manager and the financial controller, the business controller, the analyst, etc.
Okay, on a contract basis.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we employ all the people, and we rent them out on a contract basis to our customers.
And that's still going on, right?
Yeah, still going on. Yeah.
I saw that you did something with media, with Veronica Ventures.
Yeah, so this was when I was running BAS Consulting for 10 years, it became boring because it grew pretty fast. So within 10 years, I grew from one person myself to 250 people, and I was making a lot of money. Let's say I was making a few millions in 2008. So I thought this is getting boring because doing the same work, I'm getting more and more money. So I have to do something else. So I decided to ask my right hand in the company to become CEO, and I decided to do two different things. That I was going to be an investor, and I was going to do all kinds of non-executive board positions. And one of them was the Veronica, which was a broadcasting company. And that was actually one of the few board positions which I was paid for, which had a compensation scheme. For the rest, I prefer to be board member in all kinds of social enterprises. So I've been a board member for a long time at the Hague Philharmonic Orchestra and stuff like that.
And then around 2009, you founded People, Planet, Profit, PPP.
Yes.
And so what led to that?
When I started BAS Consultancy, I came already to the conclusion that there were a lot of people in the world who had, let's say, less beneficial circumstances in their lives than I had. So I decided at that time with my business partner that if one day we're going to make money with BAS Consulting, we are going to give away 10% of our gross profit to charity. So we founded a foundation called BAS Gives. And over the years, we spent over $1 million of our private money. We gave away to all kinds of smaller foundations specialized in education projects in Africa. The more I visited these projects, the more disappointed I got about the result what the result was of giving money to projects. There was always a short-term result, but hardly ever a long-term result. So I decided to change the whole strategy. So I decided not to give away 10% of our gross profit, but to invest 100% of our gross profits in world-improving companies to create economic progress in countries which have very low living standards.
So you created this nonprofit, People Planet Profit.
Yeah, it's not a non-profit. It's just it's a commercial investment vehicle, but the money only goes to companies improving the world. So which means in general that the financial return is a bit lower, but you also measure return on people and you measure return on planet. And this was 13 years ago, but of course when the term impact investing didn't exist. And I was motivated by a Dutch guy who was Mr. Sustainability already starting somewhere in 2000. He unfortunately passed away already 11 years ago. But he introduced the triple P bottom line to me, the People, Planet, Profit, which made me so enthusiastic. Those three words, I thought if you combine these three words in everything you do in your life, and when everybody will do this, the world will be a great place to live in.
Who is this person?
His name is Eckhart.
Yeah.
Wintzen. Wintzen. He was really the founder of sustainable thinking in the Netherlands.
Was he actively investing, or was he more on the thought leadership side?
No, he was also actively investing. He had sold his IT company, and he was both an investor and he was also a thought leader in the area of sustainability.
Was this his term, People, Planet, Profit?
It's not his term, but he introduced it to me. When you look it up in Wikipedia, it's an American thing. But apparently it didn't appeal to a lot of people, because when I went for the URL for my website, I could still get peopleplanetprofit.com. It's mine.
That's amazing. So tell me, what does People, Planet, Profit do, and what's the investment thesis?
It changed during the years, but anyway, when we started, we decided to focus on two areas. There was sustainable food and sustainable energy. We used to have let's say it was all not huge amounts, but a few million invested in hydropower, which especially in the Netherlands is very unknown. Everybody in the Netherlands still talks about windmills and solar panels when you talk about sustainable energy. But of course, you live in Switzerland, you know that over 60% of sustainable energy in Europe is generated by water hydropower.
Yeah.
In the US, it will be the same.
And solar in Netherlands is it's not so useful. Yeah.
The Netherlands is always running, when you make a list of European countries with how many percentage of the total electricity supply is being generated sustainable, then the Netherlands is always the last on the list, but which is not strange, because we are one of the few countries in Europe who has zero hydropower. But anyway, we had 10 smaller hydropower run-of-the-river plants, and we invested in a fair trade fruit company, sourcing their fruit on a very fair way in developing countries.
You also invested in a coffee company, Moyer?
Yeah, that was later on. So that was a recent investment of 4 or 5 years ago. Yeah. It was the next step in fair trade. Somebody mentioned, named it fair chain, which means that you make the whole chain fair. Which when you drink a cup of coffee and you buy it at Starbucks, then but only less than 1% of the money you pay is ending up to the farmer who did most of the work. And that's considered as not very fair, so we're trying to change that. But it's very difficult because I discovered that food chains are not accidentally organized the way that they are organized. It's the result of non-stop working on efficiency. Yeah. Like we roast our beans in Ethiopia, so we have the added value of the roasting stays in Ethiopia. But then the problem, of course, is that roasted beans, you need to get to the consumer as soon as possible, because green beans you can keep for a long time. But roasted beans, you want to have them fresh. You have to fly them to the customers, for example. So it's just an example to indicate that all the food chains are organized in a way, the cheapest, the most efficient. And so in the end, I went back to the model we have with this banana trading company. We are now a shareholder for the last 13 years. They have a great solution to make things more fair. They made all the smallholders, so the small farmers in developing countries, a shareholder in the company, which generates profit from the whole chain. So that something which I think is a great model, which would mean that, for example, that all coffee farmers in the world should have been given, for example, Starbucks shares by Howard Schultz for free.
What's the investment thesis, though, at People, Planet, Profit? Did you have a focus? You started out with hydro power.
We dropped the whole energy thing because I think that the tipping point has been reached, and there's, of course, no discussion anymore in the world that we have to shift towards sustainable energy, and it's going very fast, and maybe not fast enough to prevent the world from a climate disaster. But for the last, I think since 3 years, the yearly investment in sustainable energy production is 10 times bigger than investment in fossil energy. The whole shale revolution in the States, of course, set back this whole development. That delayed the whole development with at least 10 years, unfortunately.
Yeah. So you're funding 100% of your profit out of BAS Consulting into PPP, People Planet Profit. Over the years, how many investments have you made?
It still was never became very big because when I left the company in 2009 to do other things, the financial crisis hit. So BAS Consultancy, which was making millions before that, had a very tough time. And in the end, my successor, he was not very successful in turning around the company. In the end, I decided to change the model, and now I made People Planet Profit. I modeled it like I did Future Food Fund. So that means that I have limited partners in the company who also invest in the company. So now, for the first time in a long time, we are actively investing again. So I have now a pipeline all geared towards sustainable food chains.
Okay, in that same company.
It's still in People Planet Profit, yeah. And so we focus on 5 types of products. They have in common that they are sourced in generally poor countries, and that they are being consumed in generally rich companies. Our goal is, of course, to make the chain more, to make a more fair chain. So that means if we're looking for coffee, cacao, chocolate, nuts, tea, and tropical fruit. Those are the 5 things we invest in.
And then in 2015, you founded Future Food Fund, which, of course, is the meat of what I wanted to speak to you about today. Why did you feel the need to set up a separate company?
So People Planet Profit was my own thing. It was more or less my private thing to get my money from BAS Consultancy to sustainable investments. But on the same time, I had some negative experiences with direct investments, and then I mean that when I was looking at potential investment projects, I was not very successful in my investments in general, and that has to do with, of course, analyzed everything in hindsight and saw that I was always over-optimistic. I'm a typical entrepreneur. I always see opportunities. I make opportunities bigger and I make risks smaller.
Okay.
So I'm a good entrepreneur, but I'm not a good investor. Yeah. So I had a number of less good experiences with direct investments I did, either from my personal holding or through People Planet Profit. And I invested also some money as an LP myself. It's a small IT fund, and I really liked that structure. They were small funds, and there were like 15 or 20 LPs. They were all entrepreneurs like myself, and they put part of the money in the fund, and there were 1 or 2 fund managers, and you just transfer the money. And when one of the portfolio companies had problems, you didn't have to do anything because the fund managers did it. And twice a year you met up, you had a great time, you drank some good wine, and also the financial results were very good. So in 2015, I thought, I'm going to do this myself. I'm going to fund myself, just like the ones I'm an LP in. And I'm not going to do it in IT. No, I'm going back to my roots. And also, because I have great fun with my investments in People, Planet, Profits, I'm going to do this in the agriculture arena. So AgTech and FoodTech, which seems now quite normal, but in 2015, nobody was doing that. Everybody was like, what? Investing in AgTech? What are you talking about? What is that? So I decided to do that. And I also did not put any impact targets in the fund plan at that time because I already had my own impact vehicle, which was People, Planet, Profit. So I thought this is something new. This will be geared towards innovation in agriculture, innovation in food. And people want to make impact, they can put money in People, Planet, Profit.
So this is completely different structure, completely different fund, completely different LPs.
Because I suddenly was the initiator of a fund. I had to find all the LPs. I had to write a fund plan. It was all new to me. I had never heard the word carry. I'd never heard of it. So I was completely blank. I had zero experience with investment funds or investing.
So maybe this is a good point where you can introduce exactly what Future Food Fund is? What's the mission, just to frame everything else that's going to come after
Yeah,
that?
so it's a relatively small fund of a total of 14.5 million euros. Part of this money, so the biggest part is being generated by 20 LPs, all entrepreneurs from my personal network. And part of the money, about 35% or a bit more, 40%, has been invested by the Dutch government, the state of the Netherlands, the Ministry of Economic Affairs, which means that with this fund we can only invest in the Netherlands, only in companies with headquarters here in the Netherlands, because the state of the Netherlands is not giving me the money to promote economies in other countries. In our fund plan, we promised our investors we would do 10 investments between 500,000 and 1.5 million or more. Let's say the minimum investment is 500,000 and the maximum investment is 3.5 million.
So do you have any specific sectors or themes or area of focus?
Interesting that you asked this, because, of course, the same thought I had when I started, since the Netherlands is the second biggest exporter in the world of agricultural products. We have huge food companies in our country, so we also thought, okay, what's going to be our focus? And then we looked around, and then we found out there were hardly any startups. So there was zero startup culture in the Netherlands, zero entrepreneurial spirit in that area. So we decided after 1 year not to have any focus, because in the whole of the Netherlands, there were maybe less than 100 startups spread out over the whole area of AgTech and FoodTech. And of course, I wondered, how is that possible? And because at that same time, I started my study in Wageningen to support my Future Food Fund activity. So I would also, I had zero knowledge of running an investment fund, but I also I didn't have my education in agriculture or food. So I thought, let's get that in order at least. And then you see there's a big tradition in the Netherlands in agriculture and food, but it's all either big family companies or multinationals, like Unilever, for example, or huge corporations like Campina, it's a dairy corporation, I think 15 billion of revenue. And all the students from the University of Wageningen, who all had knowledge in their head to make a startup to disrupt the industry, all went to work for one of these three companies in one of these three areas: big family companies, big cooperatives, or big multinationals. The nationals and the family companies and the corporates had no interest in disrupting anything, so there was nothing happening there. Not until the Dutch government told the University of Wageningen and all other universities, listen guys, the world is changing, everybody's talking about startups, scale-ups, etc. You have to show us at least 50 spin-offs per year, otherwise we cut back your subsidy. So that was suddenly a change, a completely different wind from The Hague towards all these universities to stimulate the whole culture in the Netherlands, because it's not only, of course, in agriculture. We had a very bad startup culture. It also has to do with Dutch mentality. So if you go to school, then or if you go to soccer, then your mother always tells you, don't worry if you lose. You go to play soccer not to win, but to participate. Or when you participate in running the 400 meters, no, you enjoy participating. Winning is not important. But that's what these mothers tell their children. And I used to live several times. I lived shortly in the United States. Of course, that's quite different.
Winning's the only thing.
Yeah, it's completely different. The whole mentality in the Netherlands, but in bigger parts of Europe, I have to say, than in the United States. And of course, I don't know what over society-wide what is the best, but anyway, it has been changing a lot the last 10 years. So the government really stimulated universities, and Amsterdam has now a big startup scene, of course, for all IT-oriented companies, and Rotterdam has it, Utrecht for life sciences. Now Wageningen is finally picking up a bit.
So you started with 14.5 million, and how much of that to date have you deployed?
We did 6 of 10 investments, which is not 60% yet because of these investments we have next rounds.
So AgTech is what you're focused on.
AgTech, FoodTech.
FoodTech. So I want to step back a second because I'm certainly not familiar with this, and the people listening to this might not. So I just want to step back and make sure I have a good understanding of what we're talking about. All of this would be solving this food problem, help you understand and make it real, because I'm not living and breathing this like you are. Can you provide me like a background on what the macro trends driving the sector are and some of the key global food chain issues that have to be addressed? Because I guess the big picture is we're talking about feeding nearly 10 billion people and there's huge population growth. But then are we talking about issues on how food is produced, which is often damaging environmentally or socially, or where it's produced, or how it's poorly distributed, or how a large percentage of it ends up as waste? Tell me how you see this sector and what the issues are and what you're trying to solve.
The answer, of course, is all of the above. But let's start with saying that there is no shortage of food in the world. The people always talk about food waste, but that's 9 out of 10 discussions about food waste are emotional, because people like to combine, of course, starving children in Africa with throwing food in your bin in the Netherlands, or the States, or Switzerland, which, of course, is not a good comparison because the food is here, it's not there. It's very easy to produce food for everybody. It's not very easy to distribute it in an honest way. That's already a complex thing, and it's even more complex to produce the food in a sustainable way. The food production now has a lot of negative elements, and that's something which really drives the sector now. I would say all funds, especially in scale-up scene, investing in food, they look at improving the system, but not so much improving efficiency. It has to be making it more sustainable, and more efficient is, of course, fantastic. But for example, we were talking earlier about the weeding robots. If you spray Roundup, you don't need a weeding robot because there are no weeds. So 10 years ago, everybody was spraying Roundup, and there was no demand for weeding robots. Now we come to the conclusion that maybe Roundup is not very healthy for people, and it's definitely not very healthy for the soil. And everything in the first 30 centimeters of the soil is dying all over the world. So now we're thinking, okay, so when everything is dying in our topsoil, then it means that in 30 years from now, we won't be able to grow anything anymore because the soil cannot support the plants anymore. So you get a whole new demand, and this is an example, for new products. For example, the weeding robot, because if you don't spray Roundup, then your wheat is being overgrown by weeds, then the harvest results are plummeting. So a lot of AgTech things are being driven by sustainability. Not all, because for example, if you look at the drone technology is being used more and more in agriculture. So you can, let's say, every square meter or every square foot in a field of corn, for example, has different characteristics. Some part has a lot of weeds, some part has not that much weeds. Some parts are dried, and other parts, you can optimize the revenue of big fields of corn, etc., by using drones. And of course, it only works when the crops is valuable enough. Otherwise, you cannot deploy all these extra techniques. But animal welfare is another thing, of course, which is becoming a big theme. So I think that, I'm not sure about the numbers, but in the Netherlands, we have at any given time about 135 million animals live here, and 104 million chicken, and then 13 million pigs. We have 10 million cows, we have sheep, goats, etc.
Yeah,
and non-stop being slaughtered, and that's something which people a couple of years ago didn't think about. Of course, nobody wants to think about it because we made animals, of course, to something which is not a living thing anymore. We made it to something which is like something you use for your own benefit. I just read a very good article in the English Times about the comparison of pets and animals on the farm. And people ask, why do you eat pigs? In the meantime, every day you kill a pig, which had a horrible life, is being killed in a horrible way, which is more intelligent than your dog, is more social. Those thoughts never came, they were never there, and now it's becoming a discussion. So people want improvement on animal welfare. So that's a very big topic. Also drives a lot of agriculture technology inventions. Then, of course, consumer health issues is a big trend. Since 3 years, more people are dying of obesity than of hunger. Great, so the world's really improved. The percentage of poor people in the world drastically went down the last dozen years. It's not a good development that people have obesity instead of hunger.
So what was the opportunity you saw, though, in food tech or ag tech versus other options in the sector, like crop science or vertical farming or alternative protein development or something like that? How did you come to the focus on tech?
Well, no, it's let's say I would say these three areas you mentioned we also look at. So we do the whole spectrum, everything which is improving, and then alternative proteins, of course, is a direct result of animal welfare issues, of rainforests being cut down to grow soybeans, etc. So it's so vertical farming. We also do investments. We are one of our most successful portfolio companies is supplying all their output to vertical farms. As I said, the food industry doesn't have a real focus on only specific things, but we call vertical farming also AgTech.
So these are huge issues that are out there, like huge. And then, as I understand, you're limited to investing in the Netherlands because of the government participation. So why a 14.5 million euro fund when the problems are much bigger? If you didn't limit yourself to Netherlands, you could scale up the fund and have bigger impact than.
That's true. So that's why I'm in the middle of setting up the Future Food Fund number 2, which will be at least 3 times bigger and which will not be limited to the Netherlands.
By investing in tech as a VC, aren't you competing head on against big mainstream Silicon Valley headquartered funds who have European offices, who are much larger in size and clout? So how do you differentiate yourselves from traditional tech VCs, and why would startups choose to get investment from you versus some of these larger, more well-known VCs?
I think that's to do with that we are a bit more early stages, so we don't invest in the man with his plan, as we say it, and we don't invest in that. We invest but the revenue can be very low. So when, for example, we also invested in an inventor and manufacturer of asparagus harvesting robots, sold two of his prototypes to a farmer.
Yeah,
that was enough for us to invest. So the Silicon Valley bigger AgTech investment companies, they will be our typical exit candidates for us.
So that's who you expect to make your exits to.
Not only, of course, but yeah.
You're focusing on companies that somehow disrupt value chains.
Yeah.
And the food chains you've also mentioned, are incredibly complex these days. Yeah, can you give me a sense of this complexity? And then what do you mean exactly by disrupting value chains?
The value chain itself is complex, but also the disruption is not one thing. You mentioned earlier the alternative proteins. So it's when you look at the burger, the protein burger from the States, the famous one, what's the name again?
Are you talking about a real meat burger or
the burger which looks like meat and also is being used by I think the Burger King?
I don't know. I don't live in America.
Beyond Burger, of course, I meant Beyond Burger.
Beyond Burger.
A successful listed company in the US, huge valuation. And that will, of course, disrupt the whole husbandry chain. These huge farms all over the world with thousands of cows, 10,000 of pigs, millions of chicken, that will be disrupted if we would change to start consuming plant-based meat products.
But are these burgers that try to taste like burgers, or
yes.
is it just
important for me and you? Let's say for people from our generation. Of course, when I talk to people now in university, they don't think in terms of we need potatoes, we need vegetables, and we need meat. They just think. They don't think like that, so they don't want a piece of meat. They don't want something which is the replacement for their meat ration. Something typical for our generation. People 100 years ago never ate meat. That was only for rich people. Can
you make it a little more real for me? What does it mean, disrupting value chain? Give me an example from your portfolio, like how you see it.
Again, there are many value chains, they're all complex. For example, you already mentioned vertical farming, which is also a disruption, of course, because it's suddenly it's quite different. The chain now is completely different to get the vegetables towards the consumer through the present model than through vertical farming. The same with also all kinds of distribution models. Like in Europe, you get the value chain of the supermarket is being challenged right now by all kinds of startups. I don't know. Do you have gorillas in Switzerland?
What's the name? Sorry?
Gorillas.
Gorillas. I don't know of that, no.
Anyway, a scale up, it's growing very fast. European scale up.
But we're a very small country. We're half the size of Netherlands.
Yeah.
So this isn't the first place they launch.
It's a home delivery of groceries, and within 10 minutes you have your groceries. So you feel like eating a banana. You push 2 buttons on your app, your Gorilla app, and then 10 minutes later you have the banana on your doorstep.
Okay, by your description, I can tell you we definitely do not have that in Switzerland. Oh. Yeah, we don't have any delivery that you can call, and in 10 minutes you won't have anything here.
One of our portfolio companies is also in that area. It's called Peter Pot. And they deliver packaging-free groceries to your home. And that's something. It's our fastest growing portfolio company. People are all sick and tired of using plastic. People know that plastic is a great product, but they're all confronted every day with seeing the plastic soup on television in the oceans.
I'm getting the feeling you're not looking for a specific impact. You're looking up and down the value chain. But do you have a preference for disruptions on the production side, or on the consumption side, or either?
No, I think my personal preference is production side. There's more going on, and it's also easier to understand. Let's say on the supply side, there's also a lot of emotion, which is always quite difficult, of course, for investors, because you cannot put human emotion into spreadsheets. So on the production side, you can put everything in a spreadsheet, and it's also more exciting. There's more going on. So it's if you look, for example, if you look at soil quality, that's soil depletion. It's a complex business. It's so interesting. There's so much to learn still. We know more about the moon than we know about the soil we live on, we walk on every day.
Right. And what would you say is more challenging, changing human behavior or changing industry practices?
Human behavior, because it will always go. It's very hard to convince people not to go for the lowest costs. I also think there's a big role for governments to do something in that. That they have to be leading in rules or subsidies or whatever.
Can you explain your portfolio approach and who you're investing in?
I wouldn't say it's of course no rocket science. It's just disciplined work. Basically, there are 3 things we look at. Of course, there are many more things we look at, but we can summarize 3 things. That is, first of all, the business model itself. That has to be very clear to us, of course, how a company makes money. Secondly, it has to be very scalable. And then the third thing we are selecting on right now is the team has to be complete. We have a very clear vision on how a team has to look like, and so when the team is not complete, we don't.
But you consider yourself an impact investor. You're definitely investing for impact, right? Not just tech.
Yes.
Tech. Yeah.
Yes, and with Foodsman too, it will only become stronger. We'll be more focused on impact, and again, the impact is very wide because it's a complex issue.
Could you give me an example of the type of investment transaction that you prefer?
My 2 favorite investments we have in the portfolio right now are Peter Pot, which I mentioned before, the packaging-free grocery delivery, and then the other one is called Foam Plant. They make a biodegradable growing plug. It's a very technical story, but let's say if you look at the vegetable on your plate in the evening, it comes from industry which you can divide in 3 sections. The last part of the section is the farmer growing the vegetable and delivering it to the supermarket. And then, of course, the first part of this whole chain, it's the company who makes the seeds and who is non-stop upgrading the seeds. It's seed improvement companies. It's a huge business, especially in the Netherlands. It's very profitable and it's huge.
But this is Foam Plant, right?
Yeah.
So what do they actually?
So the value chain 3 parts are and in between the seed improvement company and the vegetable farmer is a whole group of companies. They make from the seed a little plant.
The seedling. Yeah. In English. Yeah. Okay.
And the vegetable farmer doesn't buy seed; he buys seedlings.
Right, and plants a seedling. Yeah.
Yeah, and the seeds are not being planted these days anymore in normal soil. They're either being planted in glass wool kind of rock wool. Have you heard about this?
Oh,
stuff?
glass wool. Yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah, it's like something like a fiberglass wool, artificial wool. No? Yeah.
That's being used in this industry for growing the seedlings.
Yeah.
Or it's peat. But both of these products are now, they're not accepted anymore from an impact point of view, because by using peat, you destroy valuable nature areas. And of course, this glass wool is being made out of oil products. And the things where you put your seedlings called a growing plug. Foam plant developed a growing plug made of milk acid, which is totally, it disappears by itself. So how do you say it?
It disintegrates, huh? It disintegrates in the soil. Yeah. Okay. So you're eliminating peat destruction, and you're eliminating using artificial material that's created from petroleum, fossil fuels.
And all big vertical farm companies are either using our product already or are looking at it, because the vertical farms, they want to do everything sustainable.
And then your first example is Peter Pot. It's a grocery delivery with no packaging. Is that right?
That's glass jars.
So how does it work?
Pot orders, for example, a 1,000-liter barrel of premium quality olive oil in Italy. And then in our warehouse, this olive oil is being put in the glass jar. And then the glass jar is being delivered to the customer, together with, of course, a whole bunch of groceries. And then when the olive oil is finished, then the customer gives back the glass jar to Peter Pot, and they wash it and fill it up again.
I understand how that works in olive oil, but how do you do the same thing with, I don't know, tofu or chicken or anything like that?
So far, we only do, I will give it English words, products who don't get bad that fast. How do you call that?
Yeah, durables, like more like
durable. Typical products which go very fast are breakfast cereals, all kinds of nuts, candy, all kinds of spices, everything which you have in your kitchen, which you don't have to put in the freezer. And of course, the next step will be to also do cool stuff, not food products. But it's of course a whole process. It's a costly event. We already had to buy over 1 million glass jars.
And I think you said your average ticket size, or what you look for, is between $500,000 and $2 million or something like that.
Yeah, in theory we can go up to 3.5 million, but the average ticket size, the exact average ticket size will be in the end 1.2 million. But in practice it will differ between 500,000 and 2 million.
And your fund, is it open-ended or closed-ended?
It's closed, so we need to sell off all our portfolio companies within the next 7 years.
Are you benchmarking against anything?
Our target is a money multiple of 2.5. So that means if the money you invested, you will get back 2.5 times as much back. So that will be around between, let's say, 15 and 20% IRR.
How many LPs do you have?
It's 25, but there's one family of 5.
All of them are engaged, or not passive?
They love to be engaged. They even want to spend a lot of money without being paid. They invest to make money, but they also invest because they think the market space is very interesting, and they also invest because they think entrepreneurs, people who start up a company, who are scale-ups, are nice people.
If you have 25 investors and you have 14.5 million in the fund, and the government put in 6, they didn't all put in $1 million each.
I don't know. $1 million is my biggest investor, and most of them did $500,000.
Was there any challenges raising the money?
The first time it was, because I had 0 experience, and I didn't have a very good track record as an investor myself. So of course, everybody told me, "Okay, Peter, we love you. You're a nice guy, but why should I give money to you?" So I had a few friends who immediately said, "Okay, we participate because we trust you, and we will also trust the fact that you will be very careful with my money." Most of them wanted some more reassurance, so I first had to hire 2 investment managers who were going to manage the fund before I could finish my fundraising.
How many people do you have in your fund? How many employees?
With the 3 of us, so I have the 2 investment managers and myself.
Are your LPs investing out of passion, or are they investing out of returns, or both? Or
it's a combination. It's passion and returns.
Are there any risks to your investors that are distinct from the general risks that any investor has to, let's say, traditional AgTech investments?
I think if you don't care about impact, then of course there might be other ways to make money. I don't think it's possible now these days to invest in scale-ups who are not aware of the fact that they have to make impact in this particular industry, the food and AgTech industry. Then of course you can. There are bigger venture capital companies. They still invest in old-fashioned technology. That's maybe a bit safer. On the other hand, it's also short term. If you look at, for example, of course, a different area, but big oil, all the shares they plummeted. That will happen. Everything which is not sustainable, also in food tech and AgTech, will go down shortly.
I think Blue Horizon Ventures just raised close to 200 million euro, something like that. So that's going to be more competition for deal flow in the space.
The bigger the firms are, the bigger the tickets they go for. So in this particular space we are in, let's say the seeds states, there is not that much competition still, because funds who become successful become bigger, and then they say they go for the next phase. And apart from that, we've built up a very good reputation. When we started out over a little bit over 5 years ago, nobody knew us, and now every AgTech or FoodTech company, every AgTech or FoodTech startup in the Netherlands knows our name. So I don't fear competition that much. And apart from that, we also do a lot of investments together with other companies. So we do, out of these 6 investments we've done so far, 5 we did in combination with other VCs.
If you had to name the one most important challenge in the VC sustainable investment space at this time, what would you say it is?
I think in this particular market we are in, is the scaling up that's a challenge. And I'm talking then about sustainable investments in the AgTech and FoodTech. And because everything goes much slower than, for example, in IT. If you invest in IT, everything goes very quickly. And that's, of course, I've been giving a lot of thought, and it has to do with the fact, of course, also that we're talking about seasons. So when you invest in, for example, the asparagus harvesting robot, there are only 2 months a year you can test your product. Slow market, which means also scaling up goes slower.
Can't you enhance the growing period to year-round in high-tech greenhouses?
Yeah, you're still dependent of the growth speed of a plant, and you can, of course, enhance that, but you cannot make it extremely fast.
What do you know now about sustainable investing or impact investing that you wish you knew in 2015 when you launched the Future Food Fund?
I think what I know now is that all scale-ups, they all have a very separate impact chapter in their business plan. I wasn't aware of that 5 years ago. I'm also a lecturer at the Wageningen University right now. I'm lecturing master students who want to become an entrepreneur in this area, and they're being taught by the university about the triple P canvas model. I was being taught the normal canvas model, just go for profit, and all the students now are being taught triple P canvas model. That's for me a new insight that if you ignore impact, that would be a very dumb thing to do these days. Because all the entrepreneurs, they're all very passionate about impact.
Could you describe an example of an investment that you passed on because you were skeptical of it, and in the end it turned out to be actually way better than you thought? And what did you learn from that?
I think we passed on one investment, which in the end we regretted, and we passed not because we didn't believe in the model. It's always a combination, of course, also of the valuation. So we thought the valuation was too high, and my lesson is that don't walk away when there's less than 10% difference in valuation. You should reconsider.
All right. Someone wants to get into the VC AgTech or food tech investing space. Where's the best place for them to learn the business or cut their teeth?
Yeah, so I would just start talking to funds in this area. And subscribe to Ag Funder. That's I think Californian newsletter, which kind of compromises all investments in this area worldwide.
Ag Funder.
Yeah, and just talk to funds. And of course, I'm getting a lot of emails from people who want to talk to me. I all turn them down, of course, because I'm always too busy. So you can consider yourself lucky, Scott.
I appreciate you taking the time. Listen, I've gotten through all the questions I wanted to ask you. It's been very interesting. I've learned a lot about this space, and always nice to also meet another fellow Dutchman. But it's been quite an amazing journey you've been on, and your demonstration of entrepreneurship has been impressive. And the way you've charged full speed ahead in things that you didn't really know everything about, but figured it out. That's admirable. It's a lot easier to take the opposite approach and be too cautious. So I want to thank you for your time. I really appreciate you taking the time to sit down and talk with me. It's been very interesting.
All right, Scott. Well, it was a pleasure to me and for me as well. And I have to say, you were very pleasant in the way of communicating it. And the next time when you're in the Netherlands, let me know, because to sit down and meet each other live would be nice.
Very good. That's a deal. We'll do that, huh?
All right.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please do me a favor and hit the like button and subscribe to receive future episodes. You can find more interviews, articles, and information on sustainable and responsible investing at our website, sri360.com. If you enjoyed this interview and you would like to read more lessons learned from world-class SRI investors, get yourself a copy of my book, Sustainable and Responsible Investing 360 Degrees. It's a must-read for anyone wanting to know more about investing for positive social, environmental, and ethical impact, all with market returns. These are the stories and tactics of those leading the way as sustainable and responsible investing goes mainstream. Sustainable and Responsible Investing 360 Degrees is now available in hardcover, ebook, and audiobook format wherever books are sold.